If you think it's going to be okay for Bernie Sanders this time. Remember last time the Washington Post did 16 negative stories in 16 hours, and then the MSNBC fired Ed Schultz. Well, first they told all their hosts you can't cover Bernie Sanders, and if you do, you have to cover him negatively. And then Ed Schultz has said, no, I'm going to cover him, and they fired him for covering Bernie Sanders. Now, when you watch MSNBC, you got to know Chris Hayes, fake tough guy Lawrence Ogano, Chris Matthews, Rachel Maddow, they've all been given directives from the head of NBC News to screw over Bernie Sanders, and that's what they do. So if you think it's going to get better, it's not than it was last time, because now everybody's hip to what they're doing, which is why I have a show, because people wanted to get information about Bernie Sanders. They couldn't get it from CNN or MSNBC or the Washington Post or the New York Times, so they had to come to social media. They come to YouTube. And you know they'd rather have Trump president than Bernie Sanders, and that's not hyperbole. I'm not making that up. I'm quoting Donnie Deutsch, host on MSNBC and CNBC for the last 12 years, that the corporate Democrats, their first order of business is not to defeat the Republican. That the first order of business of Tom Perez, the DNC, and all the corporate Democrats is to first make sure you defeat the candidate who represents workers. So they first, just what the DNC did, they first defeated Bernie Sanders, and then maybe we'll turn our attention to Donald Trump. If we beat Trump, good. If we don't, that's too bad, but we definitely got to beat Bernie Sanders. So Donnie Deutsch, just so you know, before we start this, he's worth somewhere around $250 million.
About where the Democratic Party is. I think it's a statement about fearing the left flank of the party. You've seen Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders obviously sticking to the core of who they are. But even now, people who are not Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, people who are capitalists by definition, by the virtue of the success they've had in their lives, afraid to use the word. It's incredible.
It is incredible. And Donnie Deutsch, I know you've said it, but I mean, others, again, are saying it. The Democratic Party is in crisis right now. Trump is going to devour every one of these candidates if they can't say they support capitalism. But yes, it needs to be reformed. It had to be reformed after the Gilded Age. It had to be reformed by Teddy Roosevelt. It had to be reformed by FDR. It had to be reformed again by LBJ.
What does that tell you about your system? Hey, this system is all the time. It keeps getting over and over and over, and guess who it keeps crashing? And guess what? It had to be reformed again in 2008. It didn't get reformed, which is why we got Donald Trump as our president. It didn't get reformed. And 80% of the workers in America live paycheck to paycheck. We didn't reform it. Barack Obama didn't reform it. This is why. Because the Democrats are now Republicans.
The truth of the matter is that my policies are so mainstream that, if I had said the same policies that I have back in the 1980s, I'd be considered a moderate Republican. I mean,
Barack Obama did worse than John McCain would have done to the people who got their houses underwater. Barack Obama not only didn't help the homeowners, he kicked them out of their houses and then not only bailed out the banks, but he gave the bank their house too. That's why we have Trump.
And so, Joe, I'm going to take it one step further, because this is how dangerous socialism. I find Donald Trump reprehensible as a human being, but a socialist candidate is more dangerous to this country as far as the strength.
I don't know if you caught that.
That was amazing.
But that's called a Freudian slip. So that's when you let out what you're actually thinking. And so what he just said, that socialism is a greater threat to this company than Donald Trump. What he wanted to say out loud was country. What he was actually thinking was company. I'll play it for you again.
I find Donald Trump reprehensible as a human being, but a socialist candidate is more dangerous to this country as far as the strength and well-being of our country than Donald Trump. I would vote for Donald Trump, a despicable human being.
No, you're wrong.
There it is. Just what I said. They would rather lose to Donald Trump than let Bernie Sanders win. And there it is. He said that. So you know this is true, right? So here it comes. Here's Politico. And remember what all that trouble Ilhan Omar gotten when she said that Israel has hypnotized the world, and but she was talking about the APEC lobby, which buys politicians. And now here's Politico, Bernie Sanders, the secret of Bernie's millions.
Standing in front of a money tree and a big house.
So he's standing in front of a money tree that someone drew. Like, that's an illustration.
Is
He
it
didn't,
though?
he
Maybe
didn't
that's
take a picture in front of a money tree. They just did that to him.
What?
I mean,
I don't know who planted that tree, Jimmy Putin.
why didn't they just make him with a big nose,
Yeah.
right? Because he's Jewish and air is free, right? And that would be the same thing. That's what. Look at the money. Oh, he's Jew at money. Isn't that the same thing? Hey, I heard.
It's so funny because
Why don't they just do that? Here's what they did. Bernie Sanders might still be cheap, but he's not poor. Look, he's got 2 houses on each. First of all, he's a giant, which makes me scared. And he can put 2 houses on either shoulder. This is Politico. This isn't Fox News. This is Politico doing this. You feel good now? You read Politico? You feel good? Oh, by the way, what's the name of this guy who wrote it? Michael Kruse, Kruse. Michael Kruse, who obviously has that thing in his brain missing called the shame mechanism. Normal people have. Michael Kruse doesn't have that. He does this. Awesome. And then he does this. This is a real thing. I'm not making this up. It's called Bernie Two Houses. Yep, Bernie Two. So here's another. This is another. So the photo illustration was by C.J. Burton for this in Politico. So good on you, C.J. Fantastic work. Also, Katie Helper says, "Wow, Michael Kruse in Politico. This is just fantastic. But it could be even better. Why not add a Jewish star or make his nose hooked? Maybe some rodent imagery. I'm just blown away. Sorry to end on an earnest note, but you're just despicable people, and shamelessly so." And they are. So that's what's happening. And by the way, do you remember how the world stopped when Ilhan Omar said something about the Jewish lobby buying our politicians, which is 100% accurate fact? Do you remember how the world shut down and the View had somebody broke down crying on the View, some entitled knucklehead? It's this is what, and it's not stopping. Bernie Sanders, even though he was cheated against, and no one knew who the hell he was, he made up a 60-point deficit and captured 46%. 46% of the delegates in the Democratic primary. So a good way to gauge enthusiasm for a candidate or a message is, by how many people show up to see him. Remember Bernie would do things. So they like him. People are enthused. They like his message. They're ready. Those are people who will go out and work for you in your community. They'll go out and they're active. They want to be there. They want to do things. Here's from Hillary. Here's Hillary having a little bit of a harder time getting people's enthusiasm.